You've probably all seen this diagram that lays out two vanishing points and teaches you how to set up boxes in perspective. But here's the question for today's video. How do you go from something rigid with all the guidelines like this and take what you've learned here to produce something that we see people do all the time, freehand draw boxes in an environment without horizon lines and do it very intuitively? Today, we're going to be outlaying 4 quick steps that gives you everything you need to transition from this to this. Step 1 is realizing that the top and bottom planes of your shapes are essentially the same thing, and it's really the key thing that you need to be focusing on in order to place these objects in perspective intuitively. So what do we mean? Here we have a plane that forms either the top or the bottom of a cube. So let's demonstrate this. Here's the question. Which one of these is the top and which one is the bottom? It really doesn't matter. You can go ahead and construct your cube over these to create an either up-facing cube or down-facing cube. It's that simple. The top and the bottom, the 2D shape, it's really the same thing. You don't have to get confused by either one. Let's do the same thing for the cylinder. Now, while those aren't completely accurate, you kind of get the picture of what's going on here. Focus on the 2D shape that's on the surface facing you, and everything else falls into place after that. This 2D shape is really the key that I want you to focus in on as we go through the next 3 steps. Now, for step 2, we're going to focus in on how the horizon line affects these 2D shapes that we have been keying in on from step number 1. The most important thing to focus on here is the height of the 2D shape. This is going to be the key point for step number 2. As you notice, if the 2D shape is close to the horizon line, we want a very narrow 2D shape in terms of height. If it's far away from the horizon line, we want a very wide or tall 2D shape. Let's demonstrate this. This 2D shape is very close to the horizon line. Therefore, I have really flattened it out. Let's move away a little bit from the horizon line and see what happens. Notice I have now opened up the height of my 2D shape just a little bit. This is the main key point for these shapes. The same thing happens with the 2D oval. And let's also copy that for the shapes above the horizon line. Now, once again, now that we realize that these 2D shapes, we can really just add on the rest of the lines to make it into a cube or a cylinder. In this case, if these shapes are below the horizon line, we draw the rest of the cube below the shape. And the same thing for those above. As you can see, the most important thing is really this 2D shape. After that, everything else is just keeping the consistency of the angles you have already created with the 2D shape that has been placed on the paper prior. If it's a wide circle, put a wider bottom. And of course, these are not perfect, but you get the point. Now, let's move on to step number 3. Step number 3 now kicks your intuition into overdrive. Now that we know that we can always determine where the horizon line is simply by looking just how squashed that 2D shape is, we can easily tell no matter what shape we put down first exactly where the horizon line should be. Let's demonstrate this. Just by putting down this squash shape, you can already tell that this cube, no matter whether I draw it above or below, it is pretty close to the horizon line just by how squashed it is. There you go. I don't need a horizon line on my paper to tell me that this box, this cube, is very close to the horizon line. Let's look at another one. Now I can already intuitively know that this shape, this box or cube, is further away from the horizon line than this one. Is it facing up or down? We can determine that for ourselves. Let's try one more. This is going to be a cylinder. Is it close to the horizon line or far away? We know that this is pretty close to the horizon line. Let's continue drawing our cylinder. There we go. Now that we intuitively know where our objects are in relationship to the horizon line, the only thing we need to do is to keep our hierarchy in line. So if we draw a box that's on this level, all other boxes on this level should maintain this same height in terms of the 2D shape. So if I'm putting another box in the same scene, I should not have a 2D shape that is like this. Unless it is tilting over to show more of the bottom. If I want to draw another one that's in the same orientation as this one, it will also have to maintain the same height. Step 4 involves putting it all together. Let's do a very simple example. First of all, we know that the first 2D shape we put on the page will determine where our horizon line is for the entire rest of all of the boxes or images that we draw. So choose that one wisely, or not so wisely. It really doesn't matter, because no matter what you choose for that original shape, you're going to know exactly where the horizon line is. And then all you have to do is follow the simple principle of, if you're getting closer to the horizon line, make the 2D shape thinner or shorter. If you're getting further away from the horizon line, make the 2D shape wider. Let's do a simple example here. I'm going to put down an initial shape. So this is a not too far, not too close to the horizon line box. Now, if I go above this, I know that I am getting closer to the horizon line, because the horizon line, this box is facing down, the horizon line is above it. So if I go this way with my next box, I will need to ensure that my next box, the 2D shape that I draw, is thinner or shorter in height than the box I currently draw. If I want to draw a box below this, I need to make sure that the 2D shape that I put down is wider in terms of height than the box I currently have put down. So let's go ahead and draw a box that's above this 2D shape, but not too far above it. And we're going to include some overlap so we can really begin to get the feel that both of these objects are in relation to each other. There we go. Let's add another box even higher than that. Now, what if we wanted to draw a box below these? We simply create a wider 2D shape to begin with. And it's that simple. All of these boxes look like they're in relation to each other, and the only thing we have done is kept the idea of, as we get closer to the horizon line, the 2D shape gets thinner. As we get further away, the 2D shape gets wider. And that is pretty much it. Now, if you've stuck along with this video this long, I have a bonus for you in terms of drawing these boxes. Now, so far, we have been using pretty much diamond shapes for the top of our cubes. But what if we had a box that wasn't showing so much of each side? What should we do to make the box appear just barely turned? Well, the same thing applies. What we're really concerned with is the height of our 2D shape. So let's draw some guidelines first so that you have the concept down. This is going to be the height of our 2D shape. Now, whenever a box is slightly turned, one of the sides are going to be shorter and one of the sides are going to be longer. And then the other two sides, we will continue to maintain basically the same length. So We have a slightly turned box, so we have one side, the back, and one side, the front. And now we are going to go ahead and place our lines to complete our 2D shape. This is really the most important part of creating your slightly turned box. Now, what will happen here is that the front lines will be mostly parallel because a slightly turned box means that the box is almost facing you straight on. Now, what we are concerned about is again also the height of the floor behind the box. Because this is going to be a little bit further away from the horizon than the top of the box, we want to extend the ground just a little bit and make that width just a little bit wider than the top. So we're going to come down to where we've marked, and there we will bring our line forwards. And that is your slightly turned box. Again, the most important thing is to first of all pay attention to the width that you want to create. Create your line in the back. The next line will be longer, but it will not pass the height that you have already designated here. So in order to do that, you must extend this line out to the side. Draw your box, and then do a similar thing here, making sure that this line, the distance here, is greater than the distance you created at the top of the box. And that's all there is to it. Let's finish off with an example of drawing a lot of boxes in the same environment following this principle. Now, as an additional bonus for those of you who have really stuck around till the very end of this video, I have one more thing that I would like to point out for you. Here I have created this scene with just random boxes, random ideas, and of course I am following this whole idea that these boxes are basically on the same level, and so they basically have the same height in terms of their top 2D object. The same for these objects. The same for these objects. And as we come further away from the horizon, which is probably somewhere right in here, we get even wider 2D objects in terms of their height. Now, here is one important thing to remember when drawing your 2D objects. And this is something that I mentioned earlier on, but did not do it as explicitly as I will do it now. If this is the top of your 2D shape, you must always remember that the bottom of your 2D shape is further away from the horizon than the top. As a result, the bottom of your shape needs to be wider than the top. So if you've noticed, I have tilted my bottom lines just a little bit further out than those at the top. That is what gives me my wider shape at the bottom. If you notice, this shape is slightly wider than this one. And it's really just by tilting out the angles just a little bit more at the bottom of the shape. Now, one thing to keep in mind, if this is the floor, you need to be sure that if you draw another shape next to this, of course, for the top, you are keeping in mind the principles that we have talked about so far. The top of this shape is narrower in terms of height than this shape. However, if this is going to rest at the bottom, close to this shape here, the bottom shape needs to be in relation to this bottom shape. So if it comes all the way down, then the bottom angle and width must match closer to this shape. Of course, it's a little bit higher up, a little bit closer to the horizon, so it won't be quite as wide as this one, but it will be wider than the top of the box here because it descended further away from the horizon than the top of this box. There we go. So not only the top of your boxes are kept in relation to each other, but also the bottom of the boxes. This one is slightly further away from the horizon than the bottom of this box. Therefore, if I was drawing through, the bottom of this box is going to be slightly narrower in height compared to the box that's closest to us. This is an additional tip to then make sure that the bottom of your boxes are also intuitively lining up with the rest of the image. What you are constantly doing is the first line that you are putting down, you are constantly comparing the additional objects to the scene, in the scene, to that first object. And this is what allows you to create all of your drawings very intuitively without having to have any horizon lines. If you like this video, consider hitting the like button and subscribing so that you can see more of this. My name is Vincent, and I have been tracking my progress here in terms of learning to draw art and sharing everything I can with you, the viewer. I hope you join me for this journey, and I'll see you in the next video.